to the next fun thing. I almost introduced this as LARP Chat Live, but it's totally separate now. It's just this like awesome turn of events. So this I'm actually just streaming on my own channel on Tower of the Bard. But Joe will certainly be back once again on LARP Chat Live now that we've had a whole bunch of awesome changes. But we actually just wanted to do a cross critique because we both had the same problem, and that is that we are both we both have new LARPs coming out, and we both have entered the character creation phase to determine how our players will create their characters. And we run very different LARPs, and I'm going to let Joe talk a bit about the kind of LARP that he's going to be running. But I think we both have a very firm understanding of the kind of LARPs that each other have run. We've helped each other with a lot of ideas. I got to edit the rulebook for Lost Colonies LARP. So this is going to be a great kind of collaboration here and a critique. And hopefully we will also show everyone how to do a friendly critique, because we do friendly critiques of each other's ideas all the time. So I think this will be really productive. We're doing two different things. So Joe's LARP has kind of a more traditional character sheet like you'd find for a LARP. And for mine, we're looking at the survey for the characters. And we'll go into the reasons why I'm doing such a detailed survey when we get to mine. But I'd like to turn this over to Joe. And Joe, please introduce yourself and tell everyone all about Lost Colonies LARP.
So hi, I'm Joe Hines. I'm one of the directors of... I need some water here. Sorry about that. One of the directors of Lost Colonies LARP. We're a new LARP that's starting up in the DC, Virginia, Maryland area. We're looking to do a blend of traditional campaign buffer LARP style things, but blending in American freeform style LARPing as well. So you can expect to see from us some, live combat action scenes with foam weapons, with Nerf guns, etc., as well as very narrated, more parlor LARP style scenes where what you see is what you hear, and what you see is what you get in many cases. We're going to try to have as many props as we can, practically, but we like to also take things in a more extreme way where things can't necessarily be propped up entirely. So I've had the pleasure of working with Terry here over the last several months, informally and formally. As she said, she's been editing our rulebook for us, which has been very helpful. And we've been just kind of spitballing ideas back and forth about the LARP community in general. So welcome to the stream, everybody who might be watching, and I hope you get out of this as much as we get out of it. So Tara, do you want to start with critique of your stuff, or would you like to?
Sure. Let's start with mine, and then we'll go through yours. I also want to welcome everybody in the chat room. We already have several viewers. I want to welcome everyone in the chat to add your own commentary, add your own critique. Please don't rip anything apart totally. Don't trash it. But critique, you can offer helpful suggestions and let us know how you think that we could do things better. And now is the perfect time to do that, because these things aren't totally live yet, right? This is the phase where we're kind of still editing and catching everything in both of our LARPs. So with that, I'm going to go back to Joe's screen, because he actually has all this fancy, cool equipment and has everything up in the background here. So what you see behind Joe right now is the design document for First Bite, Second Birth, which is a contemporary vampire digital LARP experience. And I do live action role-playing games. I do design traditional ones in person, but I also run them online. And this one is specifically written to run online, but we might run it at a convention in the future. They translate pretty well to IRL too. And the premise of this digital LARP is that it's an empowerment LARP, so you can play on your own empowerment out of game. And you're playing a character who wakes up, and they're a new vampire, and they don't know a lot about what's going on. And they just have a computer with a link, and they click the link, and they're talking to other new vampires. And that's how the LARP begins. I've written it in 3 acts, and the other important thing to talk about here is this is intended to be a very emotional LARP where players can play for empowerment. So I'll use myself for an example. I'm a woman and I have some chronic illness issues, so I might choose to play a vampire who suffers from similar issues and discrimination that I do as a woman with chronic illness. And what can I do with that as a vampire? Well, as a vampire, I might choose to play that I don't have those issues, some of those issues anymore. Or if a man threatens me, I could, like, as a vampire, sort of just murder him. So that's kind of a different power structure than what I would be used to in real life. And that's where we're going with this. If that's what you want to play in this game, you're welcome to do it. The other thing I want to mention, and Joe, you can feel free to scroll through the document if you want. There are different types of vampires in this LARP. The first kind is the Nouveau V, or the New Life vampire, which is pretty simple, baby vampire. It's a free-form LARP, so what that means to you is very open to interpretation, and we're going to get into that when we look at the character stuff. I'm just going to address some comments. Yes, Joe does great green screen work. I'm very appreciative of this.
First time doing the green screen tonight. I was freaking out for, like, I don't know, half an hour at least.
Oh, it looks
great.
Trying to figure out
how to get this working. So
it looks great, and I'm on an old computer, so the fact that you can show my document on your screen is the best.
I'm super happy that I was able to get it.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So the second type of vampire in this LARP is an older vampire. We call them Seniorum. And they're basically, they don't have to be super old, but they have to be old enough to have turned the others, the new vampires. And there's only one of those per game, or per run, usually. And that vampire comes in during the second session. So there's 3 sessions. First session, new vampires, figuring things out. WTF, I don't understand what's going on. Second session, the older vampire comes in. And one challenge I'm facing with the survey is I didn't account for that when I created the character survey. I didn't account for the older vampires. So even though the character creation process will be similar, I didn't really think about it when I made the character sheet. So that's something I'd like to keep in mind. My character questions are vast and detailed. The player actually does most of the heavy lifting of building the character. And that's not because I'm trying to be lazy, that's because we're playing very close to home in this LARP. We're playing very close to our real life selves and issues that we face, and I don't want to get it wrong. So
yeah, I want to just call out here really quick in the book here, you have safety before story.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And so all of it is, the player is more important than the story that we're telling. And I would say at least half of my design document is actually just safety and consent stuff. Costuming guide, don't appropriate things. So my design document is more centered around that. And
you call out that it's not therapy.
Yeah, we're doing some really potentially therapeutic things. I've actually seen a therapist who said, please keep LARPing and designing LARPs and explore these emotions, but also, keep talking to me. And that's important. You can play through those issues. It's not therapy. And I also want to point out that I had a sensitivity reader on this document, and his name is Adam Underwood. He did a great job, pointed out a lot of cool stuff. I found a couple of problematic things that you do not see in this document because I immediately removed them. And I felt really confident writing confidently about other people's experiences because I knew that he had my back and that he was going to check it. So I actually was able to be more inclusive in the design because I was like, if I screw up, I'm going to hire somebody to look through this and have my back there. So I definitely recommend Adam Underwood. He did a great job. And then Shayna Cook did the editing on it, like the regular proofreading, except for the one mistake there that Joe caught. Thank you. But she did a great job too. So definitely, if you're not hiring me, please hire Shayna. She did a really great job with editing this as well.
It just goes to show that even if you are an editor, you still need an editor.
Oh, yes, you do. Very much so.
A lot of this is because you get so used to looking at your own words that your brain naturally just skips over parts of it that you shouldn't. That it's seen it so many times that you read the sentence as you conceived it in your head and not what's actually written down. So one thing that I found here earlier just now that it's highlighted is that you put in the sentence here, in the setting how a character was turned, as well as whether that character sought it or consented, which to me seems like it's the same thing.
Mm.
It seems like the sentence I was expecting was sought it or not.
Yeah, I think what I was actually going for, and feel free to go ahead and add that change, was sought it or did not consent. I want to leave that option in. It's a really touchy subject. Vampires are really a tool for empowerment if you want to use them that way, but they can very much be flat out bad in terms of consent and how you play with them. There are a lot of gripes in other communities about that and the traditions that those communities have, and I'm trying to avoid that very much. I'm trying to fall really more in line with what Jessica Carrolls is doing over with Sidereal Studios. Just amazing work there. She's deliberately trying to flip all these tropes, and
Absolutely.
yeah,
Flipping tropes is huge. There's only so many stories theoretically that can be told, but that doesn't mean that they have to look the same every time you tell them.
exactly.
And breaking up those tropes is very important. I'd like to do a shout out. We've got Old Man Skinny Guy listening in.
Hello.
They host their own podcast, Old Man Skinny Guy, which is really awesome. We had them down here a couple weeks ago recording some podcasts in the very room that I'm sitting in, waiting on hearing those coming out. And
That's
I think
exciting. I'm scheduled to be on too.
Yep,
I'm just I'm hard to schedule. It's terrible.
That's awesome. And then we've also got Aries Omega there, 2017. He's one of our marshals. Chris for Lost Colonies is watching in, so give a quick shout out to Chris there. Welcome to the experience here. Real quick, you want to talk about why you're an all lowercase LARP now?
Yeah. Oh, the controversy. I will be running a stream over on the Larp Chat Live channel on July 4th, appropriately enough, during the day, so that my friends from all over the world can join in, even if they're 5 or 6 hours ahead of me. And I am going to be talking more about this then, because it's a little controversial. But the way that you stylize the word LARP, and I'm saying this both as a designer, a player, and an editor, there is a connotation, so it implies certain things, right? Capital LARP, all caps, that usually implies, for a lot of people in the United States especially, your like fantasy buff or combat game that focuses on heavy fighting and stuff like that. It focuses on an old tradition. That doesn't mean it's a bad tradition. It's certainly a tradition that has very much affected the design that I do and the design that Joe does. But lowercasing it implies that you're playing with more of a freeform style, a consent-focused style, and a more emotional style. Now, if you would have asked me this question a week ago, I would say that lowercase is going to be, and I haven't changed it all on my website, but I intend to, lowercase would be also Nordic inspired. But there's been some pushback from some people in the Nordic LARP community that they're not comfortable with us using those terms and then profiting off of LARPs. I can't even afford health insurance, so I can't do this stuff for free. And I feel like people should be able to make money off of their art. And I'm moving more into art territory with this type of LARP. So I'm going to try to very much not use the term Nordic inspired anymore, because I don't want to appropriate that from the people that made that style, especially if that's not what I'm doing. But I am still going to keep it lowercase LARP, because even if it's simply American freeform LARP, I think that the lowercase goes with the style. And I talked a little bit about this more solo when I first started editing the Lost Colonies LARP rulebook. Joe, do you want to talk about why you decided what you did with Lost Colonies LARP?
We did a capital L lowercase ARP because Lost Colonies LARP was actually the name of the LLC that we were running. So it was actually a legal entity name. We're actually in the process of changing that to go a little bit away from specifically Lost Colonies, but I'll reveal that later. We'll still be keeping Lost Colonies LARP as the name of the LARP, but we're going to have kind of a parent company.
And that's really a growing pain, because I branded everything Chariot LARP when I started doing my digital LARP. And somebody, Claire Wilshire, who runs Lands of Exile, reached out to me and she was like, I think your idea is amazing, but I'm concerned about the longevity of it. Because it's, I made some money right away and I had a lot of success right away. And that kind of got me thinking, okay, I need to have my next digital LARP lined up. And so I tried a couple other things and streamlined the process a bit, and she was absolutely right. People got tired. They didn't, even though they loved the continuity, they wanted something else. So, But now, as a result, I have, like, the Chariot LARP system and a bunch of stuff that's still labeled, like, my Facebook page for the LARPs is still facebook.com/Chariot LARP, because I didn't want to change it without a redirect. So that's something that a lot of designers go through, a lot of people who do an LLC or incorporate, and maybe for any of you listening to us, maybe you can learn from our experience and come up with the bigger thing first. Mari did it right with Learn LARP. She made Learn LARP, alongside New World Magischola, so then when she went on to do other stuff, she already had it down. I did not think that far ahead.
No, that's and I think various people are going to approach things from a different perspective. We took probably a good 6 weeks coming up with the name Lost Colonies, and then you get all excited and go, you get the domain name, okay, you got that, you got to make sure you got everything, and it's full steam ahead, and you have to do these things, one bit at a time. And previous companies that I've done were just the thing. Mm-hmm. So naming is just one name, and there's clearly needs to be a little bit of separation between the company and the product.
Yeah. And why did you make the choice to go LARP the way that you did it?
Because it was consistent with the look of the Lost Colonies word. So it was purely a capitalization, standardization. We tried all capital LARP. It looked weird. We tried lowercase LARP. It looked weird. I recently read an odd thing. 7-Eleven, if you look at their logo, mm-hmm. all of the letters are capital except the last N.
That's really interesting.
Wow. And nobody notices it.
Yeah, I never noticed that. Wow. That is really weird.
I wanted to ask you about this continuity experience term that you've got here.
Yes. So in my LARPs, in most of my LARPs, there's a continuity. So people are used to playing campaign LARPs if they're used to playing American Boffer games. A lot of those games can run for years, every month. You play the same character, you have your experience. You're going to have a campaign experience. You can get that kind of experience at Lost Colonies. It's going to be awesome. You should check it out. A lot of freeform LARPs don't do that. Or some of them will do that, like Chamber LARPs will do that. Vampire the Masquerade absolutely does that. You can play the same character for like 15 years or whatever. But a lot of the smaller freeform games don't do that. A convention game, there are some that run multi-conventions, but for the most part, you go in and it's a one-shot character.
Right.
So my LARPs have multiple runs, so you can join like one run, which, every Sunday, run 2 is Tuesdays and Thursdays, scheduling thing. And then, but those runs exist in the same universe, and every run has 3 sessions. So let's say you join run 1, you get 3 sessions as the new vampire character, as a nouveau V. And that, so you could do those 3 sessions, but then run 2 is going to start maybe 2 days after your run started. So everything you did, even though you're in run 1, is affecting the people in run 2. And since it's a digital LARP and we're not confined by space, only time, you can actually have the opportunity to hop in on other runs, because you're playing in the same world. You're existing in the same world. And I found that when you incorporate the technology into the digital LARP, it's very easy to do that. I didn't plan Chariot LARP that way, but it happened. I was like short on a player for a session, and there was a player from another run who really wanted to check it out and join in. I was like, well, why not? It's the same universe. And then I had to come up with the reason why my character, Captain Emily, was in all of the runs, and my friend Terry, who was playing the game, came up with a great reason and said, you're all androids. So one of them was a human, and the rest of them were androids, since we were in a sci-fi setting, and it worked really well. So, so thus the continuity was born. It feels a lot like playing through something that's like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel. And if you don't know those 2 shows, Angel was a spin-off of Buffy. Angel, the character, first appeared on Buffy, and then he got his own show. And for a while, they were running concurrently. So something that would happen on Buffy would then affect Angel, and then would then affect Buffy. And that was kind of like a really phenomenal thing that hadn't been done that way before.
Makes it really hard to binge watch those shows, though.
It really does, because then you gotta watch in a certain order, and the way that that continuity, like it could be better in something like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but they're making it a lot. They're making it a lot more consistent. And one thing, like I love Star Trek: The Next Generation, but sometimes in the early seasons you can tell that a different writer wrote this episode than the last one. They're very episodic. And I'm like, but what about all that character development? And I really think, to their credit, the actors on that show brought a lot of that with them. Like, they remembered, oh, my character went through this traumatic event a few episodes ago. And they brought that in themselves. But I think television and all of our other media has evolved more towards a continuity experience. So I'm excited to have that in this digital LARP.
So here's my first bit of critique.
Yes.
When I first read this first an introduction that we've got up on the screen right now, and we went to the sentence, "What did the moon mean to you?" I completely lost. I thought for a second I was in a different document.
Oh no!
Because there was no entry point for me. There was no let's talk about what it means to be a vampire, right? It was a little bit too abrupt of a change.
How would I segue into, hey, alert, we're going into the fictional world now?
Well, and part of it, I think, might have been simply because when I personally read things, a lot of times I will skip the headings.
Oh, no.
Just the way my brain works sometimes.
Right.
And so I will lose the context of, I'm reading the small text, and I just keep reading the small text.
Yeah.
And sometimes it also happens to me, I'll skip over a diagram that is kind of important to the context of the text.
And I realize also I try to couch everything in one document. So, like, I'm a marketer, and I can't divorce myself from that. So the copy above this, I was thinking not only as intro copy for the document, but that's what I pull from my website. When people say, how do I give an elevator pitch about this game? Because digital LARP is a complicated concept. That's kind of what I use. Any suggestions from you or from the audience about how to kind of make a smoother transition is good. I will say that is the first part that I wrote of the whole design document on the plane. So it makes sense that it's a little disjointed, and I'd love suggestions on how to kind of prep the reader for like, hey, now you're entering the world.
Yeah, so there's actually a concept that I've heard about recently of the magic circle that is used at LARPs to invite people to enter into the world of the LARP by either everybody joins hands and steps to a circle, or they all say some kind of thing like 3, 2, 1, lay on, or there's a tradition to getting into character.
Right. Maybe using that here, and the moon being something that exists to us and our characters might be a good way to do that if I was clearer about it.
Yeah, so I think just a little bit of an on-ramp here would be helpful.
Okay.
I don't know exactly what it is, but once I figured out that I was reading, lore, it read well. Okay. And it covers right away that this is aimed at a wide variety of people, and that there's not one particular type, and you broke some tropes down immediately and just flipped things on their head.
Yeah. And I've got to say again, knowing that I was going to have somebody read through this for a sensitivity edit made me feel really bold about what I was writing. Because normally I'm like, I don't feel like comfortable talking about the Black experience because I'm not Black. And the solution there is, if you want to include the Black experience and you're not Black, then get a sensitivity reader who's qualified to understand that. So that's kind of where I went with it. And I'm really like, I feel like, okay, because he didn't change any of that stuff. He actually found a bunch of stuff that I left out, and a couple of things that that Adam could see somebody who didn't have good intentions subverting to kind of do harm. So I restructured and deleted a lot and change things. So yeah, I really am proud of this section, and I feel that knowing I was going to have a sensitivity reader really helped.
There was one other thing here that I saw earlier that let me find it again. This sentence here, it is time of power. It's the time of power for you. the order of those words
Mm-hmm.
didn't resonate very well with my brain
Mm.
in particular, right? So I would see something like, like now it is the time of your power,
Okay. That makes
right?
sense.
Ending with a strong word.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm coming at this from what I was expecting to read versus maybe
Yeah, no,
what's
I agree. I think that makes sense. And I did also kind of mean this to be like a poem. And so
okay.
anything that disrupts that rhythm though and kind of stops your brain from proceeding is a problem. So I think I like your wording better.
But then, of course, you have to watch out for ending this next sentence down here with power if you're going
Yeah.
for poem stuff to not have too much repetition. So
Yeah.
I'll leave that there as a suggestion, just to remember that maybe this one sentence,
Mhm.
all of those, was the weakest.
Yeah. Thank you.
And then you called me on this in our guide. I don't know how to pronounce that.
Oh,
V
Nouveau V.
Nouveau
Yes.
V.
Yes.
So I would stumble over that.
Okay. I should definitely put a pronunciation. I have it in the glossary, but having it at the end of that section would be useful. I
Okay.
think just, maybe like putting an asterisk there and just saying pronounced and then have
Well,
it.
I think especially important because people who are reading this document are then going to be using those words potentially
Yes.
in a live setting where they're going to have to pronounce it.
That's true.
It's different than just writing for an audience that can read it and they can get away with pronouncing it however they feel comfortable in their
That's
head.
very true, yeah.
All right. Here's a question, not a critique, but a question.
Yes.
I am personally going away from using the word game to refer to LARP
I
as much
removed
as
games
possible.
throughout the document and didn't even think about the heading.
So I'm tending to use things like LARP experience
This
for
could just be
events.
the story unfolds or something like that. Might work better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that works better. It's really just a heading to set up the loose structure of the 3 acts or the 3 sessions that we play in.
I really liked that you started this off with night 1.
Thank you.
Right, that was very important to me to get that this was going to be okay. I read earlier that this is a 3-act thing, that they're on different nights, and here's night 1, and so it gives me the sense of things. And I know we haven't gotten to character critique yet, but my question here is, why can't I leave this room? And I know that's it. That it's you've bought into the idea of this LARP is a digital LARP, and I've got this screen. But I think that for some players, you're going to want to give them a reason why they they don't want to leave the room, because a lot of people are, especially with an emotional situation like we're setting up, you're setting up here in this LARP, they might have that flight reaction.
I'm laughing just because I had the exact same conversation with Ryan Hart when we were talking about game design for Pandemonium. Because it's like, okay, if you have the players caught somewhere, they're going to have the impression that it's a mystery and they need to leave. And when you're in a set area, in that case in the hotel casino space, or in the digital LARP where you're confined to being in front of your computer, you need a why. And my answer for this LARP, I think, is going to be to add that to the character questionnaire and ask them, say, okay, you're opting into not really leaving your gameplay space for the most part. Why? And have them, because I don't want to make them locked in if that's not what they want, or if that would make them feel out of game anxious. But we need a reason.
Right. Yeah. Right. Well, and my thought here, just really quick to give you an idea, is maybe to change it from your awakening to instead of being this is the very first night that you are a vampire. This is the first night that you are connected to the others. So it's night 1, connecting or something like that, because then it's putting into the conceit the idea of you are at a place where you are able to talk to other people about this. instead of everything is brand new and fresh. And I don't know if that breaks the concept of the LARP as a whole yet. So, but my idea is to maybe take it the direction of now you are ready to open up about this. But I don't know how that interacts with your discovering of powers thing that I read later.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that may not work for what you want to do.
Yeah, that's worth considering though. Yeah.
Marshall on the chat says, instead of a reason why you can't leave, why do you want to stay?
That's also cool. Yeah, and I think that's a good way to think about it. Thank you, Marshall. And the answer to that might be, like, that's the reason they want to say they want to find out what happened or what they can do. Or maybe they're so scared. And that link on the computer has answers.
All right, so we put those questions into the document there. Mm-hmm. All right.
Yeah. And to answer your question, I'm pretty angry. This is a respectful critique. You can do it respectfully or we will ban you. Thank you. Great. So, yeah, so that's night 1. Anything else on that section?
Let me just scan it again real quick.
Okay.
So it sounds like a lot of what happens on night 1 is maybe answered by the questionnaire, maybe, and then the player is presenting what happens to them, or...
Yes, I've asked basically a lot of questions. So most of the time when I do either a one-on-one conversation for character creation with my players, or when I do a character survey, it's like a 15 to 20 minute process. And it's really pretty basic. And I like to inject a lot of my creativity in there, and people seem to still, enjoy what I come up with for them. This is a little different. You're creating probably 75% of your character. And again, that's because we're playing with those close to home topics. And I'm not going to feel comfortable putting certain things in there unless you say to me, like, hey, I want the situation, go for it. So I've asked some really specific questions about that.
Okay. So then, night 2, how would you pronounce this? Signorum?
Signorum. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Also needs a pronunciation.
Not as bad.
And it should be A, not an. A Signorum.
And this is a title, so it is capitalized?
Yeah, that one's capitalized, and it should actually also be italicized, because we italicized Nouveau V above. So at least for the first appearance, we're going to italicize that one.
And these are going to be played by other players, correct?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
As the GM, I'm actually going to be one of the new vampires. So the way I sold tickets was there's a full price ticket for the Nouveau V, because you play 3 sessions. The Signorum ticket plays session 2, and if they wish, session 3. And that ticket was a more accessible price. And then I have accessibility tickets, which are $7. They're meant for people who are typically marginalized in gaming, or they can't afford the ticket. And that player is allowed to choose what they want to play. So it is possible we'll have more than one Signorum, but not necessarily. It's really the accessibility ticket holders get to pick what they want to do.
And are all of the players from their first session going to be in the second session, or is this a mix and match thing?
Yes, all the players from the first session will be in the second session. The only difference is once we get into like the second run, they might have players from the first run dropping in.
Okay. So this is a possibly costume digital LARP.
Yes, I wanted to make it as open as possible because I'm trying to be accessible. So if you work all day, like me, and you come home and you're getting ready for your digital LARP after you rush through dinner, maybe you don't want to wear a full fancy costume. Maybe you just want to wear your pajamas. Or maybe you're the kind of person who has extra time, or you like to dress up, or you feel more confident, or it brings out some part of you to be costumed. You can do that. And that kind of lets the player pick, and it's something that can change between sessions.
So just a note that it should be copyrighted, trademarked characters instead of copyrighted.
And thanks, Marshall. That is a good suggestion. Marshall also suggested a more specific version of why do you want to stay that feeds into your pre-planned plot for night one. What strange thing happened that you need answers for? So that way they can kind of seek their answers by talking to other people. And that really sets it up for me to add a little something extra there in character creation.
Very, very important to say no blackface.
Because if you don't say it, people are going to be jerks and they're going to do it.
It's easier to be able to say, yeah, we put that in our document, not to do it. So you showed up, we warned you, goodbye.
Yep.
Than to have the argument, if it does happen, at the time, and they say, well, you never said anything. I mean, come on.
Yep. Yeah, and I tried to make how to look like a vampire be a bit open to interpretation, because some people might not want to do, what is considered typical. Some people might want to be a sparkly vampire. Some people might want to draw dark veins all over their face. And it's also problematic for vampires to be like white person pale, because not only does that require some people who might not normally have makeup to go out and buy it, it also is completely racially insensitive to imply that.
Yeah. Yep. Point of question, is this the correct capitalization of anti-Semitic?
I don't know. I can check on that. That's good.
I don't know. It looks a little bit weird to me, so I thought I would ask. How are you going to handle content warnings?
We have a safety system to go out of game. So at an in-person LARP, you could walk into another room with somebody and have your safety conversation out of game.
You put your hand on your head and you talk real quick.
Exactly. Can't really do that in a digital LARP where there's 6 people on the screen. And also, some of the sessions are streamed here on Twitch. Can't really do it there either if you don't want the world seeing what we're talking about. So we've settled on using Facebook Messenger. And since these runs are usually limited to 6 people, it's not too busy a conversation to toss everyone into a Facebook conversation, label it, and then talk that way. Also, for me, it's easy to access on my phone while I'm streaming the LARP. We tried using Discord. LARPers love Discord now. However, Discord is not accessible to people with low vision or vision impairments. So after having 3 players who had who just couldn't access it because it's not it doesn't work for people with low vision, I was like, we're not doing this anymore. Absolutely not. So we switched over to Facebook. Oh my gosh, it's like you get revenge on me after I tore apart your rulebook.
Not revenge. I have learned from your edits.
Thank you.
I have learned from your edits. And especially the way that I had the document set up, which wasn't the easiest to give you an editing perspective, because I had to take every one of your edits, every comma, every Oxford comma, and go and re-enter them into the core book. And so because I had to do all of those, I felt every single edit, and that really helped me to learn to structure things better. Here's a thing that I haven't specifically seen you call out, but I know that is very important to this medium. The fact that the computer itself is part of the experience, because the LARP is set in a chat room or a video conference, that is very important to this contemporary context. I don't think I see you call that out specifically as, remember, the computer is part of the experience.
It is, but I didn't really talk about it or intend that sentence to be that way. That sentence is more intended to be like if you're playing a character who dislikes another character, think about your real life, relationship in terms of power and privilege.
Yeah, no, I just realized that we've gotten to the end of kind of the what.
Yes.
Now we're getting into a little bit of the how. So
Yep.
I wanted to get that comment in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
As part of the set
and
dressing.
I found that too, because I did Hellfire and Happiness, which did have a lot of good reviews, but I did find it a little awkward to run a historical LARP and pretend we were all sitting in a parlor when we were on the computer. It was harder to be immersed. Unless I was playing my character when she got possessed by another spirit, which was really fun. It was very hard to be immersed. Whereas with Chariot, in the sci-fi setting, I was playing a character who was sitting at a computer, and I was very immersed. And I'm glad Marshall's in the chat, because the very first digital LARPing experience I had was with him and one other player, and we were just kind of like testing stuff out. And we did a scene on the astral plane, and my character was stuck in the astral plane, and his character and one of our character's other friends had to come and find my character. And so for the first 20 minutes of this digital LARP experience, I was there with a candle, like, toiling in pain, just kind of sitting there and really just spending that time getting into character and becoming immersed. And because we were on the astral plane, the computer kind of worked.
Right.
It worked better once we did it, in my opinion, once we did it in a sci-fi setting, because it was like the computer was the thing.
Yeah, that just makes sense.
Yeah.
I have a bizarre idea, and I don't know if I should share it because we're on a live stream. So maybe I'll have to share it with you after this.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
So now we're down to the casting survey part of this.
Yes. So knowing everything that you know now about the LARP, which is just about everything, we're talking about what goes on the casting survey. And my intent is that all of the text under the word casting survey goes on there. So I use JotForm, which is a great free resource for anybody who needs to use a survey for whatever reason. I am very good at organizing large projects and setting things up. But when it comes into the details, I'm super disorganized. Like, I won't have an email label with all of my casting surveys in it. That's a terrible idea. But since they all come from JotForm, it's easy to do that, right? It's easier for me to find everything and organize it. Like, I'm going to pick on Marshall because he's in chat still. If Marshall filled out his character survey and I didn't, look at it or whatever, and it was like, oh, time for me to make his character, and, I could find it. JotForm is amazing for that. I highly recommend it. And a lot of other LARPs they just use a Google survey. I find that a little bit disjointed, trying to find and organize that information, and I really love JotForm, so that's what I use. You can also customize it, so if you're into graphics or making it kind of match your LARP aesthetic, you can do that. I use something that was just kind of like a template. There's a lot of Halloween type stuff on there and other platforms, so I was able to use a lot of templated things.
This casting survey.
Yes.
Is it aimed at one person? Should I be reading this as it's aimed at me?
You are reading this after you've signed up and paid. So you're already a player.
Because I'm looking at this sentence here. Is entirely up to the players?
Yes. I see what you mean. It's entirely up to you.
Well, that's the question I'm asking, because do I need to take the other players into consideration when I'm making up my character? Is there a pre, a PG rating or a movie rating for each run?
I didn't think about that.
Different?
Generally, everything I stream is rated R.
Okay.
So, and it's on stream, and then we get consent for certain subjects, which I did talk about earlier in the document. So if you want to play through your trauma of, sexual assault, for example, I don't want to hinder players from doing that, but if another player is triggered by that content, it's not going to happen. So opting into the game means that, if somebody else is really bothered by that, then you're not going to be able to do it.
So I guess part of my question is, are you going to, sell tickets to multiple runs,
mm-hmm.
do the casting surveys, and then put the people together with the most compatible stories?
No, you pick the run based upon your availability.
Okay.
And also what's available, because since there's only one Seniorum ticket, like one person really wanted to play a Seniorum and made sure to pick a run where that was available.
Okay.
So you know what run you're in, but I am sending out the character questionnaires all at once. And I did the same thing for Hellfire and Happiness. And since I was able to write all the Hellfire and Happiness characters at the same time, or at least get a peek at what people answered, I was able to weave the plots together. And the group that we ended up with in the Encore run, where we kind of tied up some plot, I just ran an Encore game and said, look, I'm not charging you for it. Here's a tip jar. If you want to tip, like, go for it. But we just are really committed to tying up some unresolved things. The group that I ended up with was a mesh of people from different runs. And I did have certain plot lines that tied through different things. I made a mysterious railroad mystery that sort of tied through everything. And then a whole mystery about why people had been making the deals with the devil in the Hellfire Club. And that was a theme that was consistent through the whole experience, no matter what run you were in. I hope to do the same thing here. And I learned that from, I helped Mari Brown design some characters for Emerton, and then I proofread all of her characters for Beat Generation LARP. And she sets it up so that there's different categories that every character falls into. Okay. So, it's a lot easier to think of for a LARP like Lost Colonies, where you have to pick specific things that are also related to, like, your costuming and your stats, like where you come from, like your ancestries and stuff. A lot easier to categorize people. With a really, really freeform LARP, it's harder to do that. But you could think of it in terms of like in Beat Generation, there were a bunch of different types of artists there. My character was a writer. Another character might have been a photographer, so you could separate them out according to what type of artists they were, according to their age group, according to what their stances were on feminism, stuff like that. And that really made me think differently about that. And so I basically add in a category for what type of plot they might be involved in.
All right, so...
And I only do that after I get their surveys, and then say, oh, this character would fit nicely in this plot.
Okay, so I changed it to each player.
Okay.
I think that might be a little bit clearer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you said you also have a Seniorum run. The Seniorum is the person who turned always, or not always?
It's not always the person who turned other characters, but it is a vampire who has more experience. So One of the things I brought up at the top when we started was I didn't really think about that when I made this character survey. In fact, I hadn't come up. I want to be clever, right? I want to appear so clever. I hadn't come up with the idea to have the Seniorum there. I actually thought as the GM I was going to be playing the Seniorum. And what I've learned is that people who want to learn to GM and people who are kind of watching and learning always pop up in these LARPs. And so instead of, and it's really natural and it's great, and I just let them lead as we go. But instead of, waiting for that to happen, I just instead made the Seniorum so that LARPers who are there and they want to kind of try it can do it. And I trust the participants, and I hope they trust me, and that's how it is. So I didn't think about that originally when I made this part of it, but once I came up with the Seniorum idea, not being me, I was like, this is fantastic. And it can give a little bit lower price point for people who can't afford the full ticket. So, in short, this was written before I came up with that idea.
Hey, there's no shame in admitting that you have refined your process over time.
That's true.
The sheer number of things that we've thought of and discarded or heavily altered in Lost Colonies could fill a book. You always take your ideas. You're never going to have. I don't think you're ever going to have a complete and good idea from one person.
Yep.
you need to bounce it off of people.
It's got to go through a lot of different people. And also, one trend that used to freak me out, but now I really like, is that people design LARP documents and rules to be living documents that are supposed to change. And not only does that mean that you can add cool stuff in or new ideas, it means that if you evolve and you change, right, then you can change your rule book. And I think often about how President Obama felt one way about gay marriage and changed his mind and said, hey, look, I've been talking with my family and I've changed my mind on this issue. I was wrong. And, now I support gay marriage. Could he have been more progressive to begin with? Sure. It might have been nicer. But the fact that he changed and then said, like, hey, I was wrong, I'm going to make a change in my policy, was really cool. And I want to follow that kind of example because there are things I don't know. There are things that could change. There are things that could become more important to us. Who knows what kind of really damaging and screwed up law is going to be passed that people are going to want to play out their trauma with. I want to make sure that we have room to explore that, and then we also have the safety to deal with it. So it could change.
Well, and I'll just say, too, from a Lost Colonies perspective, we've left room in our source regions for people who want to bring in character concepts that we didn't think of.
That's awesome.
And so what we've said is, here's the general shape of what we're doing, but if you've got a specific idea, we can find a place to have your character come from. That will make sense with the rest of the world, and it'll be supportable by lore because we've left blank spaces. Mm-hmm. They're not big blank spaces, right? But, we haven't named every single town, for example.
And a lot of designers get really worried about that, and it's like, please, by all means, let the players write half of the rulebook. It'll make my life easier.
Goodness.
Please.
I've been DMing a long time tabletop games, and I tend to not plan too far in advance because what I will do is I will find out what the players want to do, and if they decide they're going to go west, then the thing that I need them to find is west.
Yep. And people, I see a lot of DMs, particularly in tabletop, freak out about the players wanted to go in this different direction. And it's funny because we had it happen in Dragon Thrones, and I run their online adventures or online missions which happen between the games. And at Dragon Thrones 2, Chris and Evan put in the trading post, this place as a place where they could go and do some merchant activities. But all of the players became obsessed with the trading post, controlling it, invading it, and of course it's a mega game, so we had a map and they all wanted to steal it. And so when we ran the online mission between Dragon Thrones 2 and Dragon Thrones 3, Evan had the really awesome idea, which is especially inspiring coming from a game that also has this mega game element of, okay, let them explore the freaking trading post, right? They're so obsessed with it, let them have it. And so he wrote this whole game. He had a map that people could pick a number on that they wanted to go to. And then as the GM, I had a key, and it just had bullet points of if you go here, they can find X, Y, and Z. And so my job was more to just tell the story of what, and be descriptive about what they saw. And it wasn't quite a LARP. We had some role-played scenes. It was run more like a tabletop. But my point is, it was really cool that instead of being I hate the players just want to explore the trading post, he was no, we're going to do it. And, he made the whole thing about the trading post, and they loved it. They all they wanted to do was go to the trading post, and he gave them what they wanted.
Yep. So just a note. Mm-hmm. Most of your players should try to come from the same time zone or relatively close because of the sun.
Yeah, or they can just make it appear as though they're in the dark.
Well, but you had earlier in the document that
we play at night because
you play at night because of the sun.
Yeah.
Right. So you had
the IRL reason is because I work during the day.
Dawn comes and it's time to rest. Mm-hmm. So dawn should come for everybody at least relatively close to
I find that that's what's been happening. I did a weekend run, and there are some players from Europe who have expressed a lot of interest in trying my games, and I really am hoping to eventually have one in a time zone that they can commit to. But every time I do a survey about the time zones, there's just not enough people that want to play in what for East Coast would be a strange time zone during the weekend. And I'm like, I don't care. I'll get up at like 4 in the morning if you need me to, if I can play with people all over the world. But we're not quite there yet. I want to do it. We're not there yet. So these usually run on weeknights at 8, or they run kind of in the very late afternoon, early evening on the weekends. So the other cool thing about that, though,
players come from different time zones.
Yeah,
but their characters should come from the same ones.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, and the other thing about it is, with Dawn Comes, it's like it creates a sense of urgency in each session of like, we only get this amount of time to talk to each other because we're gonna have to go to sleep again soon.
Right. Are you playing in the same physical location as another player, i.e. in the same house? If so, would you like to incorporate your physical proximity into the LARP? I could see that being really good if they were sharing a screen, but I could see it being not so great if they were on separate screens, because then there might be
it creates sound issues, yeah. So
sound issues, but not only that, the character might physically want to leave their screen and go to the other person's screen, which could be awkward.
Yeah, so I've had it happen a few times. So Steve and Jody Lee are two of my most loyal participants. They always play whenever they can. They're married. They always play in the same run when possible. And they have done both. They've played that they're in the same location or not. Hellfire and Happiness, we were all in the same location. They've done same screen. They're usually in different screens. And then I had two siblings who were in the same house for Project Athena, and they decided that their characters were so different and in different locations, and they decided they wanted to play it like they were not in the same location in real life. So they were sitting in rooms, down the hall from each other, but pretending that they were in different locations. So, but I do want to leave that open. I have a couple players who are local. Sharon Underberg and I always want to do a digital LARP where, like, I show up on her screen. So that could happen.
All right, moving on down. I didn't really see anything at issue with other questions, but on the character's blood type, are these real blood types?
Yes. You know what I should do is actually have a drop-down menu so that they don't put, like, alien blood, or something like that. Yeah.
List the options.
Yeah, and that whole thing with the blood type, since the player is creating so much of the character themselves, I wanted some kind of like light mechanic that would give them something really surprising. So I'm going to have like super non-triggering but really cool effects, like super speed or something like that, just to kind of add something to your character. But it's random. It's based on your blood type. So, each type of blood will give you some cool like power. And you might find out that you share that with other people. That was just kind of a thing that my partner actually suggested I add in, and I thought that was pretty cool.
Okay. Cool. This all looks very good.
Thank you. Did I miss anything? I love it. I have some players on here for First Fight, and now they have a preview. They can get started thinking about their characters now that they know mostly what the survey looks like.
So you talk about pronouns.
Mm-hmm.
Is it at all important or unimportant to talk or not talk about gender specifically?
I found that, so I run all of my out-of-game safety stuff not streamed. I made that decision after Chariot because I want a sense of trust to be there, and I don't want to like develop that on a live stream. So I have found that when I forget and or don't mention it or don't mention my pronouns, that people use them and set that precedent. So I put that in there because I want to be like, yeah, if that's important to you, say it. Is it important to the game? Not necessarily. It helps to have the character pronouns at least, because when you're referring to someone, it's helpful to have a pronoun. Or it's also helpful to know that you can just say they, and that nobody is going to be offended. Like, I'm not going to be like, I'm she, her, why'd you call me they? Like, you're not trying to offend me, you just didn't know or didn't ask or whatever. You didn't want to assume. That's awesome.
Right.
So I kind of want to set that precedent.
No, I fully support that, but there is also the possibility of gender being different than the pronouns used, and I don't know if that's at all important in the storyline at all. And if it's not, you should leave it out completely. Right?
I mean, I think that I'm just going to leave it up to what the players are comfortable with having for their characters.
Yeah. Perfect. All right. Let's see. Age.
Oh yeah, age of your character. That's true.
Yeah, age would be good. I think a lot of things can be communicated through clothing, but age might not be something that's very easily communicated. And I think it might also be important to... I've played some vampire LARPs in my day, and I've had people play characters that were very different than their own age, and they've done it well, and I've also seen it done not well. And so that might be something to think about, as whether or not people are going to be allowed to play a dramatically different age. And that may be something that they need as part of the experience of exploring something.
Yeah, and most people are going to be playing vampires who are just turned, but I think that question is still important for them. And then I have one to be announced player. I'll set it up. It's a special guest who is an extremely experienced player of vampire LARPs. And so, like, this person is probably... I have a feeling this person is probably going to opt to play a very old vampire, and this person looks maybe 32, right? So,
sure.
So that's definitely going to happen, especially for the Seniorum.
Well, vampires don't always look their age.
That's true.
They usually don't, so...
That's true. I have a feeling that vampire is probably going to be like 2,000 years old, and yet the player, the player looks 30-something.
Exactly. I cannot think of anything else right now. Yeah, no. Did you have any thing that you were uncertain of that you wanted me to look at?
The main thing we addressed, which was how do I make this also apply to the Seniorum characters? Okay. I think that was my big concern. And I think I want them to answer the how were you turned question either way. And I should probably have like a yes or no question, or like a what type of vampire are you playing question at the top of the survey. Okay. Just to make sure it's clear that everybody's included and everyone's supposed to take it. It's just senior with EM. Yeah. Yeah, and I should put one thing in there. And from what I can tell, the players who are picking the Seniorum vampire characters, like, they're the ones that are coming to this with, like, having a really cool history in mind and might show up in a Victorian costume or something cool like that. Those are really good questions. Yes, that's perfect. That's good too. Yeah. Like, what do they do that annoys you?
Well, you gotta be old and crotchety if you're gonna be an old vampire, right? You gotta have something that annoys you. Like, oh, this again,
That's true.
Like Doctor Who. Yes, it's bigger on the inside. you know.
I love it. No, that's true. That's perfect. And those are great questions to get them thinking. I think that's all I have.
Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And I'm the only reason I'm nervous about it is I've set the expectation really well. I have just like you, I have a group for people who are playing my LARP on Facebook, and I've really tried to set the expectation like, hey everyone, you're not going to get the character survey 2 days before your LARP like usual. You're going to get it in advance, and it's going to take you some time to think about, and it's going to take you some time to fill it out too. It's going to be like a 45-minute commitment here. Because they're used to getting it last minute. They're used to getting it, and I do get a lot of signups in the last 48 hours before the game. So,
wow, okay.
Yeah, so that's something to consider too. I think it's like part of the medium, because it's like people are bored and they're like, oh, hey, there's a digital LARP running Sunday? Cool, I'll drop in. Hey, sure, I'll spend $50 on that. It's like a last minute thing. Sure. So I always had to have time to do the last minute characters. But I think for those who, and that's part of the reason why I usually do all of the characters within like 2 or 3 days of the start. But this is going to be different. I'm only going to do those last minute ads at the end.
Marshall's got some questions for us.
Ah, yes. Okay, questions for Seniorum. What mistakes did you make when you were new? What do you want out of these new vampires? And what is the biggest danger to your power? Oh, those are all great. Thank you for those suggestions. That's fantastic.
Biggest danger?
Yeah, like what do they still fear? And that touches on a theme of this LARP, which I'm very curious about, which is when you're playing a character who has started out feeling powerless, and then they become powerful and no longer logically have to feel powerless, is that fear still there? Right? Like if I fear...
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if I fear being attacked by men in a dark alley at night as a mortal woman, and then I become a vampire, despite the fact that I could easily defend myself or kill them, am I still going to have that fear? Because my thought is that trauma is going to supersede logic for some of these new vampires, and I'm really looking forward to exploring that. Because you have to, I feel like maybe these characters will have to work on really reconditioning themselves in addition to adapting. And I'm really interested in that. I don't think it's just a matter of, hey, I'm a vampire, now I don't have this problem anymore. Like, your experience is still there,
I'm adding in, how have you overcome fears for the Seniorum? How have you overcome fears you used to have?
That's really good, because this character may wish to mentor the younger ones.
Well, yeah, that's my idea as well. Is that naturally speaking, they should have more experience. They should have some advice to give, and you knowing what that is going in, you can help them mold that into something that will enhance the experience of the other characters, because you've got the secret knowledge of how that's going to interact. And
that'll also help me tie those Seniorum characters in with the new vampires, because what I don't want is for them to be so different that,
lying in the air.
Yeah, they don't feel
connected. Go away, old man.
Right, yeah. So that's true. Those are great suggestions. Marshall, thanks for adding those questions. They're really good ones. I feel pretty confident.
Before we cut away, we should ask if just our viewers if they've got anything else they'd like to ask.
Yeah, are there things that you would add? Marshall, I know Marshall's playing this LARP, so
I'm just going to step away real quick and get some more water, so I'll be right back.
Okay, you do that. Yeah, any other things that you think I should be asking could be really helpful. I'm going to zoom over to me for a minute, and I'll do a little bit of an advertising break here while Joe's getting some water. If you do, in fact, like vampires, not only do I have the Vampire Digital LARP, I also have a book called Mrs. Blackwood, which I've recently edited. It is by A. Wayne. Some of you know her as Alex. And this is the first book in a while that I've edited and is now published. I did a developmental edit on it. You can find it on Amazon. Just look up Mrs. Blackwood and you'll find it. It is somewhat romancy, It is also very, very vampiric, and she was one of the people that I consulted when I had this idea for the LARP, because she's the vampire expert, and I don't know much about vampires. I've read some of Charlaine Harris's books. I've watched a lot of True Blood. I like Interview with a Vampire. I have not done a lot of LARPing in vampire-related things, so my vampires are kind of based on what I've watched and what I think they should be and what the experts told me. So that's what we have.
All right.
Welcome back.
Switch over now.
Switching gears. So no, I have read your rule book, and one of the reasons we're really switching gears is because your LARP is different in that you're going to have specific stats, and you have a more clearly defined list of things for people to select from, which in some ways is a little bit easier. And you have that on there, which region, which ancestry, etc.
Yeah, so we're blending a lot of different styles together in Lost Colonies LARP. And one of the things that we're doing is we're actually bringing in some kind of tabletop style mechanics that don't exist in a lot of LARPs. Now, certainly, if you've played in Vampire, Mind's Eye Theater, One Rule by Night, you'll be familiar with some of these concepts. I started out in LARPing in that type of LARP, and so I was influenced by that.
Mm-hmm.
But so when we started off doing Lost Colonies, we decided we wanted to have some attributes for a character. And so we'll get to that in a minute. But then it turns out when we shopped around for rule systems so that we wouldn't have to write everything from scratch, and we hit the Catalyst, the Lucid Dream LARP team, they had already in their rules 7 attributes. Now they used different attributes than we did, but we also had 7 attributes, so it seemed like a natural fit. So a lot of what we present is based on the Catalyst and the Lucid Dream LARP rules with their permission. They actually released an open source Creative Commons version for us to use. And then we essentially rewrote all the words into our language, but we're still based on their framework. So today what I did...
and I want to say I wish that more LARPs could or would be more collaborative like that, and also it's just such an advancement in gaming culture. And also, one big thing I've learned recently is, if you're inspired by another LARP, but you're not necessarily copying it, then list it in your rule book as an inspiration. I was saying with my characters, the way that I categorize them and tie them together in a plot for a game with less than 30 people is what I learned deliberately from working on Imerton. And when Mari approached me to work on that LARP, she asked me what I wanted to learn. And I said I want to learn how to bust out characters quickly, but make them really personal to the players. And now I'm an expert at doing that.
Yeah, so we reached out. We had some mutual friends with the Catalyst team. And when I reached out to Adam Schaefer, and I was like, hey, we're looking at possibly, using some things that we've seen that we like from your system. Would you be open to that? And he immediately said, absolutely, 100%.
That's so awesome.
We're not going to ask for any money because our philosophy is that more LARPs should exist, and it's sharing is the best way to grow the community. So
that's fantastic.
Massive props out to them. They're based up in Maryland too, so they're even close to us. And the old school mentality might be, no, I'm going to keep my stuff. I'm going to protect it.
Right, and there was no inspired by. If you went to a LARP and then you started your own, you were accused of copying, whether you were just inspired by it or directly taking rules or completely different,
There's a whole episode of Old Man Skinny Guy podcast about revenge LARPs.
I know, I have to listen to that one. I've been going through them because at work I'm allowed to listen to my headset as I do data entry. And so I've listened to so many podcasts. I've gotten through all the Nordic LARP talks. I've gotten through 3 episodes of Old Man Skinny Guy. I've just working through them. So I think I need to make that one my next
Yeah,
listen.
yeah, it's totally a good one, and they explore the definition of what exactly is a revenge LARP, and what is and what isn't a revenge LARP,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's an interesting world where there's a question of, can you steal another LARP's players? No, you can't. Right? You can't steal a player. Right? They show up at the LARPs they want to play. That's it. Right? So anyway, so we were really pleased to see that Catalyst had a system that not only would they let us use, but that already lined up with a lot of what we wanted to do. And so, kind of at the core of the Lost Colonies philosophy is that we want players to be able to experience Lost Colonies in the way that they want to get out of it the things that they want to get out of. And, we're looking to have, 100 plus person events, right? With the staff of, we have 13 people on staff right now. That's a different animal than a digital LARP where you've got 6 to 8 people sitting around, right, with the level of engagement of staff and attention that we can have. So essentially, the way we look at the Lost Colonies rules is that they're there to govern what happens when there's no staff members around, right? If combat occurs, then you know how to handle combat because everybody's on the same page. Somebody described the rules of a LARP as basically being upfront consent, that you've agreed that these are the rules that everybody's playing with. Now, when you get outside of combat, where action is fast and skill calls need to be crisp and the communication needs to be clean to avoid breaks in the timeline, to avoid breaks in immersion, you get into the what we call the parlor LARP space, or the salon LARP space. And in that space, the skills that you have can be more narrated. There's more time for a marshal or a storyteller to make decisions about what happens. And there's more time for people to try things that are outside of what's specifically documented on the character sheet. So a lot of what we have set up in our skills is this is one concrete thing that you can do with this skill. And then also it gives you an area of expertise where that, you can narrate. I'm going to try to do this. I have the skill cartography. It lets me go out and do these cartography missions. But I'm not going to, we as a LARP are not going to list out that it allows you to draw maps, for example. If you sit down and start drawing maps because you have the skill, then, that's great, right? So we don't try to strictly dictate everything that a player can do in our rule book. It's much more of a guideline in that result. Does that make sense?
That does. And I also want to say, just from the critique standpoint from the start, your sheet is awesome. I like how you set it up in Excel. I am not an Excel wizard, so that's pretty cool. Or in Google Sheets. I don't do the formulas and all that stuff, but that's really cool how it's like super simple to pick the way you've programmed it. More LARPs should probably do that. I think a lot of them just like they design something fancy, but it fills in a different way. And what's nice about that is then you as the game owner as the organizer can export the data and just kind of use it in a bunch of different ways to see where those characters are, which is pretty cool.
This is actually a placeholder system.
Okay.
The intent is to have an online character card system.
Very cool.
But it is much faster to build a Google Sheet than it is to build an online system. Now, when I was a staff member for Night Realms, I did build their character card system. So this is something that I will be doing at some point. But I don't want to commit to how that system is going to work until we've gone through character creation and we understand whether or not the actual system...
And what you'll need, yeah. But what would be really neat from an organizer standpoint, especially of a campaign-type game, is to go in and say, what's the average level of my characters? Or how long has my average player been attending this LARP? That kind of data is really interesting in terms of re-engagement of players, in terms of knowing how to scale your mods, what kind of skills to give, your NPCs, stuff like that. That's just like really, really awesome. So, and that could be really helpful for tabletop GMs too.
Another thing we're going to be doing, just to get away from character creation for a second, but to keep pulling that thread, is we're going to be allowing people to earn build for their characters by completing quests. So there's going to be kind of a World of Warcraft almost style mechanic where you get a card that says, if you do these actions, you get a build, and you turn that card back into us. What that lets us do is it lets us track what quests people are completing.
Oh, that's neat. What people are interested in doing and what can do.
What people are interested in doing. Yeah. And it also helps us look at the players who maybe haven't completed quests and ask ourselves, what is that player missing?
What are they doing instead? Why haven't they done that? Is it too
Are they missing out on an opportunity? Are they having troubles connecting with the community? Is there some kind of clique that's keeping them out of content?
That's really cool.
And we can look at the underserved players in our game and go to them and say, what do you need, right? The players who have a lot of experience and have no problem finding their own story, they will find the quests, they will complete them, they'll bang them out, they'll have a good time. We as staff don't necessarily need to pay as much attention to providing them with content because they will find it. But there are a lot of people who are going to be new to LARP or have social anxiety or possibly are new to the area and don't have friends built into, the LARP community.
Yeah, like I want to go down and play, and I'll probably know a handful of people there, but my normal LARP scene is up here in Philly, so I'm not going to recognize a ton. So
right, yeah. Or if we see that a person has come, every other event, and as a result they're only getting 2 or 3 quests done, like we can start to tailor things to help bring those people up, right? So that they get an experience that's rewarding for them specifically, and that then gets them the build they need to advance their character. And
that's awesome. And hey, as somebody who's probably going to be that player who can come in and participate maybe once every 2 or 3 times, I appreciate that.
Rebecca and I were going up to Night Realms up in New Jersey, which is a fantastic LARP, but it's a 6-hour drive for us. And with that, with the fact that we have a child that needed childcare for the weekend because she's not old enough to LARP herself, we couldn't make it every month. We just couldn't. And so, as when I was on staff for that LARP during that time, so I felt it very acutely when we couldn't make it. What that meant from a game mechanic perspective. Not that KR was doing anything wrong. Just it was the mentality was that they kind of were built for people to show up every month.
Yeah.
And there were certain mechanics that did not work as well for somebody who made it every other month.
Yeah. So, I played in a game where it was like you have to attune some of the objects that you have or can find. And if you don't do that for a month or 3 months, then you lose the object, which is really rough. Like, if real life is really more important and you miss a month, then you're punished.
I had a character that was a merchant, and I would not buy any items that expired because, I'm not going to have an opportunity to sell this before it expires, right? So, yeah, exactly. So, and we all, whenever... you're designing a LARP, you have to bring those experiences that you've had from playing other LARPs into your mentality. So this isn't a knock on any of my past experiences at all. This is stuff that I've, learned from those experiences.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you're appealing to a wider variety of players and you're creating a culture that says, hey, this is a campaign LARP, but it's okay if you can't make it every time. Your real life really is more important. And
absolutely.
As
100%.
Like in the beginning, I was super interested in the content of your LARP as soon as I found out that you were going with an inclusive design. And but then my second thing was, it's a campaign LARP. I'm not going to be able to make it every month. I don't know if I should participate. But
But
now,
we're
knowing
also
all
going to
that,
be
I'm like, cool, I can drop in, when I can.
yeah. Well, and your character won't be. We have the idea that your character can still be participating in the experience. They're just off screen, right?
Right.
They're not in those scenes.
Yeah.
Even when we have people do NPC shifts, we're going to help give them a way to explain what their character was doing by allowing them to complete certain types of quests off screen while their character is off doing something else. So when they come back and their friend says, "Hey, where have you been for the last 4 hours?" You don't say, "Oh, well, I was on NPC shift," right? You say, "Oh, well, I was off making crates for the caravan," right? That was really important.
Yeah, that's
right?
really cool.
And so we're building that kind of stuff into the LARP to help with the immersion.
That's really awesome.
Give people stories to tell.
We shifted to that in.
Tara, you just got a new follower.
Oh, I got a new follower. Thank you very much for the follower. I just heard the notification. I appreciate that. I think I might be at 200 followers now.
Woohoo!
Yeah, which I have been keeping my eye on it. I don't know for sure, but I think I'm there. Maybe someone in the chat can refresh and tell me. But I think I'm there, so that's a great accomplishment. And also as a reminder for anybody watching, if you have Amazon Prime and you live in the United States, you can subscribe for free by clicking on the crown and the subscription stuff in the upper right-hand corner. It costs you nothing. You already have a subscription included with your Amazon Prime subscription, but it supports this channel. And I actually got my first Twitch affiliate payout, which is great.
Looks like you're at 189 according to
189. Okay, so I'm not there, but I'm getting there.
Yeah.
Thank you. So getting that way is great because I'm not asking anybody really for money. You're already paying for the subscription to Twitch, but it does give me some money, and most of that payout came from that. And what did I put that money towards? Hosting fees to the Geek Initiative. Thank you. We all have costs for our LARPs and our related ventures, and that helps host the content for the Geek Initiative LARPs. So I appreciate that. But getting back to character creation. Yes, I liked that at Seventh Kingdom we had that too. The NPC shift ended up being like, where did you go? And it was like some of the characters would go and help local farmers and stuff like that was related to their character. My character was a bard, and so she would go and teach music lessons to the kids in the nearby village, which I thought was cool, and it added to the character, and it added to the stories that she would tell. So she would come back from the village with characters. So I would go NPC, or if I was off-site or something like that, I could come back and have a neat story to share with the other PCs, which was really fun. So that's an awesome thing to include in the game design. So walk me through the character sheet, because I see you have a whole instructions tab. No, is that for players filling this out?
That's for copying the sheet itself.
Okay.
I'm getting some feedback from the audio. There we go. Okay. So the very first thing that we're going to ask is just the player's information. Mm-hmm. And as you can see, we've asked for pronouns here. And I did not make this a drop-down because I don't know all the options, frankly. Mm-hmm. And an email address. And again, this is a placeholder. I actually made this character sheet today. So definitely open for critiques on this. And then we ask for your character information and your character's pronouns, because your character may have different pronouns than the player.
The only feedback I want to give on the top section, and this is something that that Erica Schoonmacher, who does all my hosting for the Geek Initiative, she's from the U.S., but she lives in Germany, and she reminded me that all of us need to have that updated privacy information on our websites and on all of our release forms and stuff. So anytime you're asking them for the email, especially if they're submitting it digitally, you're supposed to have that notice or a link to that notice. So I have a lot to update myself, but
that's a European law, right?
It is, but everybody's kind of advised at this point to do it.
All right. Well,
I know most of your players aren't going to be from Europe, but even the U.S. privacy stuff should be on there. Yeah. Even if it says, I think you'll be alright if you say, you can read our privacy notice at blah, blah, blah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And then, all right, so then here we have a drop-down which lists out, and I noticed it does it in reverse when you're it goes up, but it's alphabetical going up, unless you have enough space down, and then it goes down.
Okay.
So I'm just going to pick on one of our regions here, Holtar. Holtar has 4 available skill choices that come up for it.
Oh, that's so cool how it auto-populates.
And then Ancestry. Now, a word about region and Ancestry. In many role-playing games, you have the choice to pick your race. We're very consciously moving away from that term and using Ancestry. We did start off on race when we started off with the rules, but we've settled on Ancestry. And you'll notice that all of our ancestries are completely made up and unique to Lost Colonies. Many of them are inspired by traditional fantasy races of elf, dwarf, etc., but we've diverged from them in many ways. Now, we couldn't really do. Let me rephrase that. We kept the inspiration there because people are familiar with those things, and also because it makes easy access to prosthetics, right? So we have the Aelden there, which are our elf derivative race that use the elf ear tips that most Bofferlarps people will be familiar with, but they're not traditional elves in the normal sense. They're not older than other people. They don't mature slower, right? There's big differences that go on. So it's important for me to just say that we've gone a different route with this. Now, region is actually the most important choice for your character in Lost Colonies because it actually dictates your culture.
And can you pick any ancestry with any region, or are they locked?
All ancestries are available for every region.
Oh my gosh, what a breath of fresh air. Spoiler alert, I knew the answer having read the rulebook, but I just wanted to point it out because it's so cool that you can do that, because if you can't do that, you're going to run into a lot of people who are like, but I want to be the exception, and then the organizer is like, ugh, everyone wants to be the exception.
Right.
And the secret is, when you're designing an engaging LARP, everybody is an exception, and every character is special, and every character can be the hero that they want to be. So, simply by letting you do that, you've kind of accomplished that.
Yeah. So there are 2 regions that are more monoculture than the rest. The Cairnhandia region and the Terradinum region are majority of one ancestry, but they're also smaller regions, so it makes sense with them. But you can still play any ancestry from that region. You're just going to have a little bit more explaining to do. And we would ask people, generally speaking, to consider that region should be primarily the ancestry that's matched to it. But the other 7 regions all can take any of the 7 ancestries that we have. Now, Marshall says, yes, thank you on using ancestry. You're welcome, Marshall. And as far as there being a description for each of the regions and ancestries, we are still editing those, and we are still sending those through sensitivity readers as well. In fact, we've also hired Adam to be one of our sensitivity readers, the same as you, Tara. But we've also found 6 others that we're going to be sending portions of the sensitivity stuff to.
That's awesome.
So that we can try to cover our bases as much as possible. We've got folks from a wide array of backgrounds and levels of experience. One of our sensitivity readers is, not a LARPer, not a gamer. They're a museum curator with a background in cultural appropriation. So
that's really cool.
It really helps to reach out to the community and ask for help, and people will help you make this better. There is no way that I can, or that the staff of Lost Colonies can alone make sure that we are being aware of everything. So even by sending it through sensitivity readers, there's the distinct possibility that we will miss stuff, right? So we are going in with eyes wide open and with the idea that if we have messed something up, we will fix it.
Yes, and also it's kind of the duty of both the rulebook writers and any editor that you have going through to point out specific things that you think your sensitivity reader may find.
Yes.
What I found, and of course my design doc was really short, but I asked like 3 or 4 really specific questions of Adam, like, is this okay? Is this problematic? Is there a better way I could say it? The most valuable things he found were things I hadn't thought of at all. And that's why you really need the sensitivity reader. It's not just to answer X, Y, and Z. It's, can you read through this? Like, what am I missing? What do I still have in here that's problematic? And when I went through the Lost Colonies rulebook, I think I found a couple questionable things, but for the most part, I was like, I think this is a questionable thing, but I don't really know. You need to follow it with a sensitivity editor. And, you know, I think for the editors and the proofreaders out there, that's important to note too. If you're not sure, because it's like very few people, right, have like 27 marginalizations. You know, most of us have like a couple. So I was really sensitive to the things that would affect me as a LARPer with chronic illness more than somebody who isn't affected by those things might be. But I'm sure there were some things on race that I totally didn't even think about. And there were several things where I was like, I'm not really sure about this. You need to follow up with somebody more qualified or who has had those experiences. So don't be shy to say that as an editor. You're not supposed to have all the answers. You're just supposed to be able to either find out for yourself or point the writer in the correct direction.
So Marshall has written in, and he said, it'd be cool if more than one ancestry had elf ears. Makes that biological signifier still meaningful, but players have to look a little closer than just ear deep. Also, people who want to wear elf ears might be trying to achieve very different tropes with it. So giving them 2 or 3 different ancestries inspired by different elf tropes might help them find what they're looking for. We're doing a fun thing here with Lost Colonies. We actually do have 2 ancestries that have the option of using elf ears. The Eldin have it as a required marker, but the Faden, who are kind of a fairy-inspired ancestry.
And I'm totally not leaning towards playing at all. I totally am.
They have the option. They have multiple choices of which they have to pick 2 of, right? And one of those options includes pointed ears. So they have the option to go that route as well. Additionally, we do allow for people to do blended ancestries. Now, that's not represented on this character sheet because I just threw this together today, right? But the idea is that if you want to play a blend between a Basad, which is our cat person race, or ancestry rather, and an Eldin, then you can choose, mix and match the required attributes, right? And there's no statistical difference between your characters.
And any 2 ancestries can produce an offspring together?
They're all valid.
Okay.
And that is actually...
That's cool.
That's actually very important for us. I have seen, personally seen it over the years. There's always the half elf, the half orc, which always implies human is one half. And that it has its own problems, right? So we really wanted to kind of break with tradition in these couple of areas where region is the primary source of your culture. Your ancestry is the source of your biological look, right? But you can have an Eldin from Holtar and an Eldin from Sorgend, and they're going to be completely different personality types potentially because they're raised in different areas.
We need to start thinking of worlds that way because it makes it less human-centric, and especially as American LARPers, like, we tend to see the world as very US-centric, right? And being able to kind of look at this game world and think, that you can be half something and not be half human is super important. In Star Trek, I've done like some fan fiction writing and stuff and some role playing. I've always wanted to play a half Betazoid, half Vulcan. And people are like, that's so weird, that's really out there. And I'm like, no, we've seen the half Vulcan, half human struggle. You know, we've seen Spock struggle with logic versus emotion, and it's brilliant. I'm like, let's turn the volume up, right? Let's take it to the extreme.
Yeah.
And you know, people just tend to think that it's too weird, and I'm like, why? Star Trek isn't it's a human centric story, but it's not a human centric universe.
Right.
So it's entirely feasible to have somebody who is half something and not half human, you know,
right.
out there.
Now you'll note, I popped open the list of ancestors here. You'll note that we don't have human listed as an ancestry.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, you could think about all of these ancestries as humans.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's just what it comes down to.
These are the people populating the world.
These are the people populating the world. So
cool.
You could think about them more like bloodlines, right? That have over thousands of years diverged in biological ways and are still compatible then with each other in many ways as well.
Somebody's ready to play your game, and like you're sitting down and you're talking about your LARP, and they're like, okay, I just, like, one of my dear friends always says this, I don't want to be an elf or anything like that. I just want to be a normal human dude. What do you say?
So they would play the Aloyan.
Okay, because they're not comfortable with makeup, or they don't want to do that. They don't want all the other stuff.
We put that option in there. That's called the Aloyan. And my thinking on this, and I don't know if it's the same thinking that everybody else has, but there's a word here. It's alloy, right? Mm-hmm. That implies the strength of the mixing of things together, right? When a metal that is an alloy is stronger because it's a mixture of multiple metals.
That's pretty cool.
So this is kind of our, if you will, diluted ancestry, if you will,
mm-hmm.
Where it's just kind of made up of everybody. This is the mutt, if you will, of you know.
I know a lot of people, and sometimes I'm one of them, who will show up with like really rocking costuming, but they're gonna be like, I don't want paint, I don't want ears.
Yeah, so. And we don't want to force anybody to do things because that becomes a barrier to entry mm-hmm. to enjoying Lost Colonies. All right, so let's move on down here. I've picked for this example character that they're coming from Holtar. Holtar is a northern region. It is one of the one of the three largest regions in the world. I'm not going to go too much into it, but they are most inspired by colonial Europe, colonial America style of dress towards the Revolutionary War period. So they're going to be dressed in nicer, fancier clothes with lots of buttons on it and trim, or they could be dressed in simpler farmers' clothes that leans towards like Little House on the Prairie, mm-hmm. Longer skirts and flowing stuff like that. And we will have all of this stuff written up and available well in advance of the actual launch of the events. Please bear with us. We want to make sure that we do this right. Then they're going to be in Aloyum, so they're not going to have in the way of any heavy makeup whatsoever, unless, of course, they get to scars, which I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of scars tonight. Their background is a merchant, and this means that before they went on the expedition to join the colony, they had some training as a merchant. Either their parents were merchants, or they, fell under the apprenticeship of a merchant, or some other background story that gives them information about being a merchant.
So you don't necessarily have to have that as a class or a profession. Correct. It can just be part of your background. Like, you don't have to be a bard. Maybe your parents were, or maybe your community was like that. That's kind of cool.
When I scroll down to the bottom of the character sheet, that'll automatically fill in my first skill here of appraise.
Okay.
So picking a background will give you one skill, and that skill will be, it's just one for one. And so many people will pick it because they want to play that background, and many people will pick it because they want a particular skill. Mm-hmm. We're not going to judge either way. Then your choice of your starting guild, you see, has set up here on the right the set of skills that are available to that guild. Mm-hmm. These are ordered in their rank, and I do have up our guild rulebook, so I can quickly switch over to that and show how I picked the Acquisitions Guild. So here's the Acquisitions Guild. These are the skills that are on the chart. Mm-hmm. And they're ranked. So most people will come in, they'll have the prerequisites of agility, focus, strength, or wits to meet these rank 1 skills. they might be able to get one of these rank 2 skills at character creation. And I'll get into why that is. Because the next thing that you need to pick is your attributes. And you have a total of 27 points to spread around into these 7 attributes. And those primary attributes here, strength, essence, agility, resolve, wits, focus, and harmony, will determine for you your hit points, your physical saves, your mental saves, your quick
rests. So that is way less complicated than it looks like. Because at first glance, it's like, is this like D&D 5th edition tough to fill out? Like, it's not as bad as like 2.5, but it's still a little complex. Right. Or is it, but now that I see when you fill in some stuff, the other things fill in, that makes sense. One suggestion I have, and I know you just wrote this up today, but for the future, whether it's in this format or in a database, what you could do is list the rulebook page numbers or a link to the rulebook page over by wherever any of those skills or anything like that are listed so that people can easily find it.
Yeah, there's a strange thing with the way that we're doing the rule books that makes it very difficult to reference specific page numbers outside of them because we're generating the rule books from text. Mm-hmm. The page numbers can change.
Yeah, it could be numbered like I work in compliance documentation all day, and instead of page numbers, they do, C document, complicated number -3 version 4 section 3.5. You could
probably what I'll do though, because of the way that we are doing the rulebook, is I'll probably be able to in the card system when we have it actually just have the rule as a linked hot pop-up.
That's cool. Yeah, that's
so that and it will be maintained consistently with the rulebook because of the very technical way that I'm writing the rulebook. It's going to allow me to do fun stuff like that and not have inconsistencies between rulebooks.
Yeah. That's awesome. So, yeah, that would be a cool thing to add to it.
So most people are going to be pretty safe entering in 3s to start with for each of these.
Okay.
You'll see that it does the math automatically at the bottom, and you'll see that also leaves you with 6 more points that you can spend because at character creation you get 27 points. Mm-hmm. So we do the math for you here, and then. From just putting in 3s for everything, you see that we've got 3 hit points, 2 physical saves, 2 mental saves, and a quick rest. Mm-hmm. And this will allow you to play around with the numbers if you want to do some min-maxing and whatnot. There are some builds that are slightly more optimal than others at character creation, and we'll help people find those, of course. But ultimately, if you want to have more hit points, you bump up strength or essence. Okay. If you want to have more physical saves, you bump up agility and resolve. If you want to have more mental saves, you bump up wits and focus. If you want to have more quick rests, you bump up harmony. So they're ordered and grouped together by what they work with. So this character being a merchant, and when I would next go and look at the skills. And I didn't get to do it today, but I would like to list the prerequisites along with these so that they don't have to jump back and forth between the rulebook and whatnot. So I know that I've already got a praise from being a merchant background. I don't have to worry about meeting the prerequisite for that. But let's go look and see. I want to get import, export, and smuggle. And those are strength-based skills. So I'm going to set my strength up to 7 for this character, which gets me to 5 hit points. Yay. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to look and see that I'm also going to be interested at some point in maybe getting sneak. So I'm going to go and try to raise my agility up to 5. Okay. Mm-hmm. And
that's pretty easy. So you're shooting for that goal.
And then the way that you'll earn experience points at Lost Colonies is you'll get a minimum of 1 per event and a maximum of 5. And you spend those on these attributes, on strength, essence, agility, resolve, wits, focus, and harmony. And every time you've spent 10 more points, it gives you another skill option. The skills don't cost anything. You just have a slot open up. Mm-hmm. So you can easily just look at your guild list and say, I want to aim for this skill. And I know that with sometime within the next 10 points that I spend, I need to get to this prerequisite. And I think it's pretty easy to understand.
Yeah. Now, question, and this is from this is kind of, I guess, testing your character sheet from more of a role player standpoint. Because now that I've been in the world of freeform immersive role play, and I know that more than half of your game is that. I know that this is not just a buffer LARP. If I approached this and said, I don't really care about these numbers. I just I want to be a bard. I want to be faded. I don't really care about the rest. Can you help me?
Yeah.
How would you approach that? If I approached it as a freeform LARP and I was like, I want to show up and read poetry all the time.
Right.
And be useful.
I would say at that point, we have a classless character creation system. So while you are asked to join a guild, you can pretty much ignore that if you want. And so what I would say as, somebody who wants to play a bard style character, which we don't specifically have bard in our system, is that you're going to look at what do bards do, right? Mm-hmm. They inspire other people. They entertain other people. And so I would tell you to look at the Acquisitions Guild as being one, because there's a skill called Games. Mm-hmm. There's Sneak, which is pretty good. But then I would also tell you that you should look at the guilds that have Inspire Courage, mm-hmm. which anyone right now. The military has that.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So now, walking through this with you, I'm like, oh, I could play a Scald type character. That would be really fun. Be
Absolutely.
Tough and inspiring, but also, have the ability to have some kind of speech-giving talent and such.
Right. And I think that Inspire Courage is actually supposed to be on one other guild, but it's we're still editing some things, so
okay.
It probably needs to be in the Acquisitions Guild.
So you can approach it from a very roleplay standpoint of, I want to just do this in the game. How do I translate that into these numbers? Okay.
Absolutely.
Cool.
And there's a lot of things that people can do with their rank 1 skills, mm-hmm. and all of the rank 1 skills require is an ability score to be at 3. So, and especially bards tend to be jack of all trades, mm-hmm. or Jills of all trades. So, starting out with that 3 process of putting 3 in everything, mm-hmm. means you automatically qualify for every rank 1 skill.
Okay.
So you don't really have to worry about it too much.
Very cool.
And then at some point you're going to find a rank 2 skill that you're going to want. You're going to bump up a trait to 7, because all rank 2 skills require 1 attribute to be at 7. And that's only 4 points away from 3, which means that by the time you get to your 4th skill, you will have earned and spent, it's actually 3 more build to get to your 4th skill, because we start you at 27.
Okay.
So you might want to think a little bit ahead if there's a rank 2 you want to get, and set at least a 4 in its attribute.
Got it.
But we made the attribute prerequisites spaced out in such a way that it would be pretty straightforward for people to meet those prerequisites. Now, these attributes also can be used as guidelines for how to roleplay your character. Mm-hmm. Right? So a bard, you might want to increase your wit score and be a witty person, right? And be able to solve mental gymnastics or whatnot. Or you may look at a bard and say, well, bards are really good at balancing a bunch of things, so they may want to have a really high harmony score.
Right.
Harmony allows you to do more quick rests. So if we raise harmony up to 5, you get 2 quick rests. The character sheet will tell you that you've gone over your points.
Okay.
We'll go ahead and we'll lower for the bard concept our strength to 5, right, to get us back in line. And now what you have is twice per event, you can just refresh your skills without having to do the rest time period of 30 minutes. And that can help you help other people by getting more uses of Inspire Courage, or more uses of perhaps the game skill or whatnot.
Very cool.
And a lot of our skill design is aimed at interactive skills. Mm-hmm. So let me just talk about the games skill really quick. The game skill allows you to sit down during a rest period and play a game with other characters, dice, cards, mancala, whatever you want to play, poker. And what you do by leading that game is you decrease the amount of time they need to rest to refresh their skills.
Mm-hmm.
So you are buffing the other players by doing an entertainment, and you're also at the same time creating atmosphere that people just walking by see you playing games. It just really adds to everything. So we really want to make all of our skills have this multifaceted approach where it serves the game as much as it serves the character.
That's really cool.
So yeah, for a bard type character, I would, say you would want to do something.
That's really cool. Now, once you get through the number section,
yep.
What is there, or is that the end of the sheet?
Then you have the skill selection.
Okay, you have your skill selection. But what I'm getting at is there a section where the player is strongly encouraged to put a narrative backstory? Like, how do you handle that part of it?
Yeah, so that's part of what we want to do in session 0. And that's not really well represented on the character sheet now. And that is something that I can describe, maybe, but I haven't documented anywhere.
Okay.
So the idea is, and we're going to run our first one tomorrow night, so we're going to find out whether or not this works. We're not going to stream that, but we're going to have 4 or 5 people together on a Google Hangout doing story, character building at the same time, and I'll be able to focus on one person and take them through the steps of something while everybody else is listening.
That's really cool.
And they can, that first person may need some time to think about stuff, so then I'll pivot to the next person and I'll go round robin style and take everybody through this. And everybody will have their own version of this character sheet. And we will go through, what is your motivation? Why are you going on this trip to a strange new land in a boat away from your home? Why did you pick this guild? Mm-hmm. Now, a neat thing I said I would talk about a little while back, I'm going to talk about it now, where you talked about everybody being special. The people that go to the colony of Flint have been selected. They are special people. They have abilities above and beyond most people on Sobukand to go to Torikon, which are 2 continents. Mm-hmm. So we've built into this fact that you have been selected to go on this boat to go live in a new land because you have special skills. That allows everybody who is playing in Lost Colonies to treat themselves as special. You don't have a case where somebody's like, well, I'm just a farmer. And they kind of show up, and as a result of playing a non-hero, actually break the idea of what's going on in the game, in the experience. But there will probably be some people that want to do that. They want to play I'm just figuring this all out and whatnot. So we actually talked about, but haven't implemented yet, the idea of some people being stowaways, mm-hmm. Where they just steal onto the ship that's going to the colony, and they show up, and then they figure it out as they go along. They haven't joined.
I really like how 7th Sea handles that. And what's interesting is I've played 7th Sea as a tabletop, 2nd edition as a tabletop, and then I've also played their LARP version, and really you kind of opt into playing a hero. You can't just play someone who's going to screw everything up for everyone. But they leave some cool options in there to be sort of an anti-hero. And I think that sounds like kind of maybe more what you're doing, overall, you kind of have to buy into the fact that you're not just here to screw things up for everyone else.
Right.
But, there are some good options for you if you want to come at that from a little bit of a non-traditional angle.
Well, we do have the background called criminal.
There we go.
And as most people are probably aware, the British in the real world had a fun little punishment for people they called transportation, mm-hmm. where they literally said, and I'm going to quote Evan saying, this is the most British punishment ever. It's literally, you're being punished with having to go somewhere else and never come back. You get to live out your days over there. We just don't want to see you anymore.
Ah, yes.
Right?
The story of why I'm probably related to people in Australia.
Right.
being Irish, yes.
Australia being a big one of those.
Yep.
Now, if you look at our map of the continent where everybody's coming from, it's sort of inspired by Australia. So we're kind of reversing things around a little bit. The continent where everybody comes from is actually in the southern hemisphere and is vaguely shaped like Australia.
Very interesting. See, there's this U.S. centrism again that I always thought of. Like, as soon as I read the rule book, I was like, America.
Right. And so everybody's leaving this Australia, like, southern hemisphere land, and coming to an area that is somehow magically like the East Coast of the United States.
Yes.
So criminal is an option. And what that will mean for people is if they decide to play a criminal, their starting skill is going to be sleight of hand.
Nice.
Because, criminals, why not? But when they show up at the first event, without giving away too many spoilers, part of their agreement of joining the colony is that their criminal past is forgiven. So it's not that they're sent to being punished. It is a choice that they have made. I'm being punished. I can also instead go and join the colony and help out and turn my life around, kind of thing. And that can be played in a couple of ways, right? The laws are actually a lot more strict in the colony than they are back home.
Very interesting.
So, like, for example, stealing from another player is extremely frowned upon. So we're playing with this idea of letting people, play what they want to play. The list of backgrounds that we know is incomplete.
Mm-hmm.
So as we go through session zeros with people, we may be expanding the list of backgrounds as needed, and people come up with good ideas, and then assigning a skill to that background and putting that into the rule book. So people will actually help us expand character creation in that way.
That's really cool.
I
love it. I'm listening intently and coming up with character ideas as I listen. Because I'm like, I want to play, and now I have some more ideas. Very cool.
So then the next thing is, the last thing, you pick a skill for your region specifically, and then after your first two, then your list expands to everything in the guild or your region. You can still go back and pick your regional skills.
Okay.
And the reason we picked regional skills is because regions do have areas that they specialize in, or because they had access to certain things. So Tayen, for example, has a massive rainforest with a huge amount of biodiversity. Mm-hmm. And so they have a lot of herbalists because herbs are so prevalent in that training. They have a tradition of herbal, understanding of how herbs work. Whereas in Sorgend, they had access to like swamps and peat bogs and stuff like that. So they got a lot of like gnarly chemically kind of things and cool rocks. So they developed an alchemical tradition. And so they would have access to alchemy. In this case, Holtar has gigantic forests. You can think of like the Black Forests of Germany or North American big forests or whatnot. And so they have trapping and foraging. They also have herbalism. They're a neighbor region to Tayen. So they trade a lot with Tayen, so they have access to some of the herbs as well.
That's neat. And one thing I was thinking about actually yesterday, because I went to we have the Philadelphia Museum of Art here, which is just, I'm so lucky to live near it. It's got the Rocky steps and everything, or Rocky ran up them. Yeah. And one thing that I was really thinking about as I was going through and looking at the different types of art is how when I was younger, I didn't really think about these different regions affecting one another. I would think, okay, here's this art that's Germanic, and then here's this art that's like, from like Turkey or Russia. And I wouldn't think of there being a connection between them at all. And this time when I went through, I guess I have a little bit of a more mature perspective now. I was like, oh, I can see how some of the armor that's Germanic was heavily influenced by styles that were to the east of them, and how cool that was. Not just in terms of the inspiration, but in terms of like how those cultures interacted, how they fought, how they, how they traded. and I started kind of seeing art a little differently. And it sounds like you kind of have thought about that when you're creating how these cultures interact.
Yeah, and that's part of what we still need to review with the sensitivities. A lot of it is in the lore of these regions and whatnot, because we don't want to set ourselves up to repeat tropes that are insensitive.
This one culture took over another one and imposed their will and took all their stuff. Yeah.
Right. But I want to share an anecdote. Rebecca and I had the good fortune of being able to go on a Mediterranean cruise a few years back. And we visited, Barcelona, and we went through multiple ports in Italy, and we went to Greece, and we went to Turkey. And it was amazing when we were in Istanbul. We got to tour the Hagia Sophia and the Blue Mosque.
Oh, wow.
And the Hagia Sophia, when they were giving us that tour, like this building, it's absolutely stunning. It's thousands of years old. Which we don't have anything that old in America, really, other than mountains. Mm-hmm. And the tour guide was telling us this is actually the third time that the Hagia Sophia was built, because it got ransacked, Roman era, Istanbul, Constantinople, etc., multiple times, and they reused the stonework and they rebuilt it back up.
Oh, wow.
And one of the times, many of the pillars were stolen. And these were massive pillars. Like, you could not wrap your arms around these pillars, and they were made out of this absolutely gorgeous red tinted marble, right? So, we're just in there basking in this culture that we're learning. Days before that, we were in Greece, and the Greek tour guide was telling us about when they kicked the enemies out, and of course they're talking about the Turks, which is terminology that we never would hear in America. When we kick the enemies out, right? Mm-hmm. Like, people just don't speak like that, right? But there's this thousands of year old enmity between Greece and Turkey, right? Fast forward a couple of days, and we're in Venice, in St. Peter's Square, and guess what we found? We found the pillars that were stolen from Hagia Sophia, standing there in a Catholic basilica, right, in Italy. Because they'd literally been transported there. Like, just like the staggering amount of cultural experience that we got just from that, being able to tour those locations, and interact with them and get, the explanations of it all. Mm-hmm. Connected and made the world so much smaller for us.
Yeah, when you connect those dots. Yep.
In ways that history class never did, because we didn't have any connection to it when it was history class in America, right? Another kind of funny story. Our daughter was with us on this trip as well, and at the time she must have been 3 or 4 years old. Mm-hmm. And we're standing outside of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Okay. There's this thing that you've seen on every Italian takeout menu, right?
Of course.
Or placemat that you've
falling
seen.
over, and all the tourists take pictures like they're trying to hold it up, right?
Exactly. So you do that whole thing, and we're standing there in the shadow of it's like it's right over there. We're getting some food at a little food truck thing, and these two other tourists who we believe were from Japan come up, and they pantomime at us that they want to take a picture with our daughter.
Okay.
And this is really straight. Okay, sure. I mean, our daughter's cute, but this is a little bit weird. Okay. Then when we were at the ruins of Ephesus a couple days later in Turkey, and you've heard of the letters to the Ephesians. Mm-hmm. That was written about people at Ephesus. So we're standing where the Ephesians used to live, and it happened again. Some tourists came up and tried to take pictures with our daughter. Again, we think they were from Japan. So fast forward to the end of the cruise, and we talked to a couple of our friends about this, like, why is this happening? Well, it turns out that it's a big cultural thing in Japan, that when you go on vacation, you want to get a picture with an American to prove that you were actually there.
Wow.
It's strange, yeah. So I encourage anybody who's out there writing a LARP or a role-playing game or a book to consume as much media from outside of America as possible.
Yes.
Um,
And from
watch the
outside
History Channel.
from outside your genre as possible.
From outside your genre, absolutely.
Like, my mind was blown going to the art museum, and I was also surprised to learn that I would qualify for a special discounted museum membership because I qualify as an artist. Like, I went up to them and I was like, I don't know if I qualify. This is what I do. If I got the membership for $40 a year, I would use it. I'd be back. Because
Right.
it costs $20 as a non-member each time you go. But if you're a member, it's $40 if you're an artist. And you can go as much as you want. And you get discounts on the special events. And I'm like, I'd be here all the time. But I don't know if what I do is qualified as art. It's kind of up for debate,
Right.
even within our LARP community. And I described what it is. And the gentleman who was helping me was like, oh, absolutely, I encourage you to apply. So I think I might kind of go for it. But when I was there, it made even more sense because especially, like, I was there with my partner and he was very logical. He's not very much of like an artistic thinker, but he's very fascinated by how I think. And so he's asking a lot of really cool questions to kind of figure out how I think and how I work. And I noticed that, like, half the time when I was answering him about the art, like, it led into a conversation about, like, how I would use this as a game designer.
Okay, yeah.
Like, it's really, really neat how those disciplines kind of intersect. And, you know, so in addition to finding stuff outside of your own culture, like, look outside of your genre. I mean, I'm heavily inspired by other LARP designers. It's very common to also be inspired by media, like, you know, TV and movies. That's really, really common. But go beyond that, you know, look at old books, look at, you know, art, look at cultures that you don't normally experience and learn about them, or even food. And even if you just looked at the cultural experience of preparing and sharing a meal and what that means in different cultures, even within your own country, there's so much there. And just don't stick to your genre, don't stick to your culture, you know, look elsewhere.
It's a dream of mine, and I hope we can make it a reality to actually produce a cookbook for our LARP.
Cool. That's really cool.
It talks about the food that each of the regions would eat, and how they would prepare a meal. Because we do have a very ritual-heavy thing that we want to present, where little things like the people of Holtar brush their shoulders before they enter a building, for example. Because there was at one point a big fire in Holtar, and it rained ash from the sky for days. And so they have developed this idea of brushing the evil off of their shoulders before they enter somebody's home as a way of protecting the home. Right? And we're developing these kind of little rituals for each of the regions to give players a thing that they can grab onto and easily communicate that they're from that region without necessarily having it just be clothing.
That's very interesting, yeah.
And a lot of that is also what we need to run by the sensitivity readers to make sure that we're not
someone else would
stepping on other
interpret
people's
that
traditions.
as like a rude gesture. I played in Dragon Thrones 1. I played I'm the GM of a kingdom called Ardmore. It's all named after places that are local to me, which is kind of neat. And in Ardmore, you don't shake hands. That's considered very rude. But in all the other cultures in the game world, you shake hands. And it was amazing how as soon as and I was playing a very friendly character, but she wouldn't shake hands because that's not her culture. And it inspired so much hate immediately, like from other characters. They were like, oh, what, you're too good to touch me? And you can see how in real life cultural misunderstandings could happen. And it's not that my character was a jerk. It's just not their custom.
I played a character at a LARP who was a spy, and so he had the ability to disguise himself, which is complicated because if you're in a LARP, you're already wearing costuming. So then I had to wear different costuming, and I needed to make the costuming different enough that people wouldn't say, oh, that's just him in a disguise, right? I needed to keep up the illusion for everybody, including myself. And so I made the most ridiculous caricature character I could as an alter ego for my main character.
Nice.
And his name was Ox. And I was talking to my friend John about how can I play this up to make it different? And John said, what you need to do is you need to stand taller and you need to stand closer to people when you talk to them. You need to loom over people to give this impression of this big, hulking man with a deep, booming voice. And I was able to play that character as a different character, a character pretending to be another character, because I changed the mannerisms of how I stood and what I said and whatnot. And it's amazing how much then that makes it easier for other people to buy into who you are when you have those things that are different from just a normal person at a LARP, right? Not shaking hands or not wasting water or, never putting your back to a door, right? These little cues of acting or culture or whatnot that you can bring into a character are silent role play that if the other people know that that's the thing that's going on, really
it's another level of
communication.
Everything. Yeah, that's really neat. Really neat. Very important with the character stuff.
So I'd like to go to our viewers that we have still and see if they've got any questions or critiques or comments for the character creation. But then also just to ask you, Tara, if there's anything that I'm missing.
I would say the number one thing that I can see improvement on, nothing that you have here is bad or, ineffective at all. It's got all the basic info, but as you make your character sheet kind of more final, I would say make the sheet reflect the style of your LARP. Your LARP is really solid at weaving mechanics and a very story-centric style, a very immersive freeform style. Make that evident from the character sheets. Find a way to include the story on the sheet, even if it's like the players answer these questions between things or something like that. And I know you do some of that in session 0, and maybe that needs to be part of the sheet. Maybe page 2 is session 0. But I think there are ways that you could make it very incorporated in what you have.
Okay.
I think it should look like the LARP should look like. If somebody sees just this, they're going to think, okay, it's all about that, even if they've seen the rule book.
So we've got an idea, and I hope we can do it. I'm gonna go ahead and preview it here real quick. Excuse me while I go off camera for a second.
Okay. I'm really excited. I'm very curious about what this is going to be.
What we'd like to do is we'd actually like to take the character sheet and turn it into a passport.
Oh, that's so cool.
So that you will have your character sheet inside, and you'll be able to flip through your character stats.
But it'll look in game.
You'll be able to keep your cards here that you have picked up items and whatnot. And your character sheet is actually your papers for transit over to the colony.
Love it.
So it's actually an in-game document that people might ask you for periodically if we as staff, for example, need to check on stuff.
Oh, that's so cool. You don't even have to go out of game to do it because you're asking for their papers. That's really, really, really clever.
So our hope is that we can make this, and it will be more than just your character sheet, that we'll actually have a way to stamp attendance, like a passport would get stamped. So we still need to work out the logistics and the cost of this.
Would you consider calling your character, instead of calling it like a character sheet or a worksheet, calling it like your character passport or your character story?
Yeah, we'll be naming it something along those lines.
Yeah, I think that would really kind of convey the tone of your LARP more and get people automatically into not thinking of it as just numbers or just story, but a thing that has both.
Yeah, and then you show up at your first event and you've got your first prop.
That is really awesome. That's awesome. And then it's like you're part of the club because everybody has one.
Exactly. And then those will be turned into us at the end of the event. And in here, you'll put your quests that you've completed. And we'll be able to pull them out and catalog them and update your character sheet appropriately and whatnot. And then you'll get the book back. And your book will acquire wear and tear over time. And we'll reprint the sheet when we need to, but we'll try to keep the stamps in there somehow. We're
That's
working on the
pretty neat.
logistics of all that. But we absolutely want to make sure that the character sheet, the process of doing check-in, all have a way of keeping you into the immersion as much as possible.
That's awesome. And Marshall had another question slash suggestion that Rebecca answered a bit here too. He says, I hope regions and ancestries come with suggested naming conventions and examples, like first and last names.
Regions will, ancestries won't, because ancestries are not the source of culture. Regions are. There may evolve traditions that players themselves create, but we're not going to document those.
I love that you're open to that.
That
the players may develop their own traditions. I know that I talk about this all the time with Dragon Thrones. It started out as a Game of Thrones inspired LARP hybrid event, and by the end of this, and by I would say 4 hours into play in the second Dragon Thrones event, it was so clear that this had come so far away from a bunch of LARPers wanting to play Game of Thrones. It's its own culture. And some of that was guided by the designers, but most of it was just driven by the players. I tailored the safety stuff after the needs of the players. I borrowed heavily from certain sources, but I did that based on where the game was going, because they really developed a lot of that lore and their own traditions and took the most interesting pieces out of the original lore and really went in a different direction with it. And it's really neat that you kind of recognize that that's going to happen and it's going to become everybody's story.
We've also recently come to the realization that, we have characters that are going to be civilians and we have characters that are going to be military.
Mm-hmm.
And in talking with one of our new marshals, Dave McCormick, about the military, he was very interested in the military. He himself was in the military.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote up some stuff for us. And in talking with him, we came to realize that military itself is also a culture.
Right, that's true.
And so he helped us, first as a player, but then came on board as a marshal, helped us really to quantify what the military traditions that are going to exist inside of the new continent are going to look like, which are going to be different than where you came from, but it's going to become what we're calling the third mixed regiment, where it's going to be a bunch of disparate military uniforms, because they're going to use the uniform from their home region, because they weren't reprovisioned. They were just assigned to this unit and go, right? But then the military themselves came up with this idea of wearing one red sash across their heart to unify them, because as military people, they want to have a uniform, even though they weren't
that's
issued
really cool. Yeah.
Right. And that helps us in a couple of ways, right? So that helps us because it allows us to quickly identify the military characters. It helps the people who want to play military characters who don't want to have a uniform to have a uniform that's not a uniform, because it's just one piece of fabric.
Yeah,
right?
It lowers the barrier to entry where you don't have to
massively lowers the barrier to entry. Exactly.
And one other thing I was thinking from day one, because I have such a cool costume piece and it's military in nature, and I'm like, well, I don't want to necessarily play a combat character, but I have this cool costume piece, and I'm thinking of different ways to wear it, or could I be a diplomat from a more militaristic culture, or play a different sort of role? And and just kind of thinking about that, and that uniformity is really appealing. And now I'm maybe I should do that kind of character instead.
Well, and one of the subspecialties inside of military we're calling is signals, where your job is to communicate within the military. You're not necessarily fighting.
Oh, that's really cool.
A bard concept in the military could be a signal.
I was wait, ding! That sounds like my specific
I think we just
kind
made
of.
Your character.
Yeah, I think we just wrote my character. I think that's what I do.
So, have you ever heard of the real world skill of semaphores?
I've heard of it. Yeah, the different flags and symbols.
Communicating by flags or other long distance signaling. Yes, that is a skill in Lost Colonies.
Oh, very cool.
And the way it's implemented is, yeah, you're going to have some props. And if you want to actually learn semaphores and communicate long distance, go right ahead. But if you don't, you can say, I'm using semaphores, and you put on a white headband, which is our signal for out of character, and you're able to go a long distance to somebody else who has semaphores, give them a message, and walk back to where you started.
Oh, that's so cool. I think we just found what I'm going to do.
And we also strived really hard with our military stuff to make it so that military characters who gain rank do not gain the ability to boss other players around.
That's pretty cool.
And I'd say very specifically other players around, right? We want them to be able to have the appearance of giving orders, but the orders are actually done in such a way that they're actually a buff for the receiving character.
Oh, that's neat. So it empowers them rather than just tells them to do something.
Correct. It's a limited set of commands, and it's things like weapons inspection. And if you go through the role play, then the weapons that are inspected get a bonus.
Oh my gosh, now I know I know where I'm gonna go with the character. That's so freaking cool. That's awesome.
And that helps us maintain player agency, which is a big thing that we want to have, while still giving the feel of being a military character, while still giving a feel of having a command structure in a non-traditional military unit in a colonial setting, where it doesn't turn into any kind of negative interaction with people. Like, oh, I don't want to play a military character because that dude is a jerk, right? He doesn't have the option to be a jerk for you because his commands are limited, right? So anyway, that's kind of...
I love it. That's cool. I would say, like, your basic information is there. It's good. It's clear. It's easy to follow. It also works really well if you're a player and a staff member is walking you through it, like kind of like how you just did to show me and how we came up with some ideas together, which I think is really important when you have a character sheet you might be filling out that way. Again, I would just say as you move forward, consider really making a sheet that incorporates the immersion and the story with those stats. Like, definitely obviously have your stats on there, but like have it look the way that you want the entire LARP to feel.
Yeah, and the stats, the idea we have behind making the stats feel in game is that these were the things that you were tested on before you went on the ship. So think about them like an aptitude test. You were actually scored on these things or something like that.
That's pretty cool.
It breaks down pretty quickly.
I'm excited about it. I can't wait to play. I can't wait to make my character. And that's really, really neat. Very cool. I just got all these ideas, and I'm like, I could bring friends, and we can all be in the military together.
Winning.
I'm ready to put together a crew.
The green screen cuts my arms off here.
The green screen looks awesome, by the way. It's really, really cool. What a good use for it to have the material we're critiquing up on screen. So we didn't have to get too harsh with our critiques. I think we both thought about our respective character creation process a lot by now, and have a good sense for asking the right questions. But I really appreciate you going through that design doc with me and all your feedback. Absolutely.
And I do appreciate it. I'm sure that both of us will continue thinking, and if anything comes to us, we'll be talking offline. So thanks for setting up this stream.
Absolutely. I need to think of another segment name, right? Because now LARP Chat Live is a separate thing. And I'm doing my own thing still, but still talking about LARP sometimes, more in this kind of context of like, let's critique stuff, or let's, chat about something very specific. So I need to come up with it. I can't sign off with a thing. It's just the Tara the Bard channel. But
I mean, it could just be LARPs helping LARPs.
That's true. Right? I love it. That's cool. So if you are interested in playing Lost Colonies, what's the best way for somebody to find you online and follow you?
The best way, honestly, right now is Facebook. That's where the most stuff is. So you can go to facebook.com/LostColoniesLARP. All one word, no spaces or hyphens or anything like that. And it is Lost Colonies, IES. We are also online at lostcolonieslarp.com. And when you find us on Facebook, there is a group a discussion group, which is really where the majority of everything happens. And that's Lost Colonies LARP discussion. That is a closed group, so you will need to answer a couple of quick questions before you join. First one is, how did you hear about Lost Colonies LARP? And the second one is, we're based in Virginia, Maryland, D.C. area. Are you still interested? Fun side fact, somebody actually did find us by one of our bumper stickers, which was super cool, the other day. So that was great.
That's important marketing data to collect.
It's important marketing data. Yes, it absolutely is. And we're starting, we've got 200 people in our group right now. So
very awesome.
Come on out, join up. And our first live event is in September. But this coming Saturday, we are having an open house playtest photo shoot in Sterling, Virginia. The details for that can be found online in our Facebook group or our website or so on and so forth.
Fantastic. And if you are interested in First Bite, Second Birth, or other LARPs by me and the Geek Initiative, you can follow us. Also on Facebook is the easiest way. Facebook.com/ChariotLARP, all one word. And if you look up the Geek Initiative LARPs, you will find our group. And I put kind of all of our LARP stuff in that one group, so you can check that out. Joe has just pulled up the design document, which also has the short code there, which will take you right over to the site where you can learn more about the LARP and sign up for it as well. So I hope that you'll join me on some digital LARP adventures as well. Joe, thanks again so much for joining me and for all your feedback.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure, and I hope we can do some more things like this in the future.
For sure. Have a great night, everybody.
Good night.